late 60s, early 70s, muscle cars were all the rage. Some of those American muscle flying down the road, big engines, gas guzzlers, that's what was taking hold. But Toyota had an answer, because in 1970, development would start on the subject of this week's Toyota History Tuesday, the Toyota Celica. After the discontinuation of both the Toyota Sports 800 and the 2000 GT, Toyota had to take a new focus on sporty vehicles. So, in keeping the American muscle car in mind, Toyota took their Toyota Carina and altered it to have a higher focus on performance and came out with the Toyota Celica. It launched in the United States in 1971, and it was much cheaper than American muscle cars of the time, but its inline-4 engine had less than 100 horsepower, so very difficult to even put the cars in the same category. The advantages it did have, though, although it was a small vehicle on the outside, it was quite roomy on the interior. This is one of the first vehicles ever to be made on an automated assembly line, which increased quality greatly, which did exceed the American manufacturer's quality of the time and would be a benchmark in setting Toyota's reputation for reliability. This same year, the Celica would take place in its first rally competition at the WRC. It would actually place 9th, which was pretty good for a debuting vehicle. It also would receive the GT trim, which was a higher performance trim level. The Celica would kind of waver in that situation until 1976, when a complete new design would pop up. It was a sportier design with a liftback, a 2.2-liter engine, and was a really big hit. In fact, it was the import car of the year. Before 1977 would roll around, the Celica would have already sold 1 million units in the world. But 1978, we get our second generation Celica. It was bigger and more comfortable. Motor Trend gave it Import Car of the Year again, and it had a ton of options for customizations, especially in the Japanese domestic market. There were dozens and dozens of different varieties that you could customize the Celica to be at this time. Well, I don't know if you've heard of it, but in 1979, a Celica variant called the Celica Supra would debut, starting out with only 110 horsepower straight 6. The following year in 1980, the 4-door Celica Camry would debut. It had a Celica Supra front end with a Carina back end. And this would spawn this vehicle that you also may have heard of, the Toyota Camry. In 1981, the Celica would get another makeover and debut as the 3rd generation Celica. Got a makeover, and it was more boxy, and it was beautiful. These 80s sort of boxy sports cars are something that I very much appreciate. I love the look of them, and the Celica was one of those benchmarks that set those styling characteristics. Really early version of a digital dashboard was put in these vehicles. It had one of the first navigational systems, and the rally versions of the 3rd generation Celica, although not successful in all applications, were very successful in the African competitions, and they would be referred to as the King of Africa. Only a couple years later, in 1985, the 4th generation of the Celica would debut. It did make a switch from rear-wheel drive to front-wheel drive, a controversial one, I will have to say. It handled super well. Toyota's Dan Gurney had incredible success with the Celica in the IMSA competitions, and there was an 190 horsepower all-wheel drive all-track variant with a center locking differential known as the GT4 All-Track. This would be the World Rally Competition's Drivers' Championship winner in 1990. But before that happened in 1989, there was another redesign. It was a little bit more curvy now, less boxy. It had a more luxurious interior and a smoother engine. It did again have the all-track, all-wheel drive version, and won 3 years in a row at the World Rally Competition starting in 1992. In 1993, however, the 6th generation of the Celica would debut. Places other than the United States got the 250 horsepower GT4 variant of the Celica. This version of the Celica would won the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb 3 years in a row and set a world record that would stand for 10 years after this point. Several years later in 1999, there would be a concept car that Toyota would debut called the XYR. And the 2000 version of the Celica, or the 7th generation, would look very much like it. This vehicle was cheaper and lighter. It had a new design based on that XYR concept, And the GTS trim of this vehicle would have an 180 horsepower, 1.8 liter, 2ZZGE engine, which would have a red line around 8,000 RPMs. But unfortunately, in 2005, the Celica would be pulled from the model lineup. In following years, there would be the Scion TC, which was considered a spiritual successor to the Celica. But since then, we haven't had a reboot or rumors, unfortunately, that the Celica would return. Known as one of the best rally cars in history, a fantastic performance-oriented driver's import car, and setting benchmarks for style and design, the Celica is one of the most famous sports cars in history, especially from Japanese manufacturers. Here at Fred Haas Toyota Country, we've been really lucky that Mr. Haas himself purchased a 1984 GT Celica, rear-wheel drive, actually the last year that the Celica was rear-wheel drive, and we have it sitting on our showroom floor. It's one of those boxy designs that I said I love so much. It's a gorgeous vehicle. It is not for sale, but it is on display. If you come by, you're able to see it if you just walk right in the front door. It'll be to your right. So that is what catches us up on the history of the Toyota Celica. I skimmed over a lot of details. This is very much an overview, and perhaps in a later video I'll go much into more detail about each and every specification of these vehicles, but that's kind of where the Celica lies at this time. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Mitchell. I'm here at Fred Haas Toyota Country, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot.